when news breaks, we fix it here on Deadline DC, and the big news today is that apparently Twitter has accepted Elon Musk's bid of 43 billion, that's billion with a B, dollars, to buy the company. What's your first reaction to this, Sarah?
Well, I have two. One is business-wise, what a bad decision on Twitter's, shareholders and the board's decision. I'm not going to maintain that value after a few years of conservative, chasing a lot of people away, which we've seen with so many other social media outlets. Once they let this kind of hate take over and the conspiracies, people don't want to hang around. But the other thing is that it's going to turn into a conservative manosphere, and what that means is just horrific abuse being piled on anyone who doesn't agree with them. And the people who get picked on the most, of course, are always people of color. Women of color get the most abuse, Jewish people, LGBTQ people, anyone who doesn't agree with them politically and is from a marginalized group will be targeted. And it was like this before. Twitter wasn't always the nice place it is today, and I say that kind of sarcastically because a lot of people still complain about it. But it used to be a place where, I know that I got so many gang rape threats of being they were going to hunt me down and kill me, and Twitter would say that's not a violation of our terms of service. And I even had law enforcement people come on my timeline and say, you need to report this is a violation of the law. But no one back then did it. It was like the internet was the Wild West. Even just a few years ago, there weren't really, agencies regulating. Law enforcement didn't understand how to deal with it. People are anonymous. There's so many layers here that allow this kind of horrific abuse. But there are studies showing that when you allow that kind of stuff to go on, it silences people's voices. And Twitter's supposed to be a public sphere. That's how it's used right now, to share information and talk about our ideas. And Elon Musk, keeps saying we need free speech. What does that mean? How are people the only people being silenced are people lying about an election, plotting violence and domestic terrorism against this country, and people who are trying to kill other people with lies about COVID cures and, medication that doesn't work, that can be deadly.
Okay. My guess is what most people know Elon Musk is that he is a gazillionaire. He builds electric cars, and he went to space. So my question to you is, what do we know about Musk that will give us some sense of how he's going to run Twitter? You seem to be very fearful of his taking ownership of the social media site. What do we know about him that makes you nervous?
Well, and I want to clarify, I already know what I'm going to do. I've already been thinking about this, so I'm more afraid for other people. I've been down this road a number of times, but what we know about him is, number one, he's not that great of a businessman, and his company, Tesla, has had systemic accusations of sexism and racism that have not been resolved. His very focus that he's been going on the last couple months about how Twitter isn't open to free speech is a lie. And the only people who are saying stuff like that are people who want to say things that shouldn't be said in the public sphere. You shouldn't be able to walk up to somebody in the town hall or in, your local Starbucks and say, hey, I'm going to gang rape you and come to your house and kill you. But this is the kind of thing that because, those are we see the kind of abuse that's still being, if you want to see what Twitter still allows under these new, happier guidelines that will soon go away, no doubt, you have to look, just look at Kamala Harris and Joy Reid and the kind of abuse that is hurled at them just relentlessly, so that they end up trending. And and it's a lot of it is a weaponization of memes and sexualization and violence in pictures. And I've had that done to me. It's very disconcerting to have someone send you a photo of somebody being horrifically attacked with your face put on the photo. So I don't understand, like, if that's not where he's taking it, then what is his point? Why did he buy it? Everything actually is working better on Twitter than it has for a long time. As soon as they kicked Donald Trump off, Twitter got a lot better. There are better stories being shared, voices are being amplified of people who normally get drowned out. And that should be what we want. We want to unify not just our country, but the whole world. We want to be able to have a dialogue with people without being trolled to such an extent that people are going to leave. And that's what always happens, is that those people who are targeted silence. So they're going to silence those people.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that bothers me about this is, I don't know, that there's something obscene about $43 billion. There's just, I guess you have the situation where you have, these people like Musk who have billions of dollars to throw around, while most people are trying to, having a tough time coming up with the money to fill their gas tanks. I don't know. This seems to me this is too much. Now, what do you think? Is just Musk out to control the world and figures the best way to do it is through Twitter? Why do you think he's making this deal? I guess he thinks he can make a lot of money, but it seems to me that he's already dominated the ionosphere in a lot of ways. Now, what do you think's behind this?
That's a good question. I mean, obviously, I haven't spoken to him directly. I don't have any idea what's going on in his head. But if I look at this objectively, there's parts of him, of course, he is smarter than Donald Trump, but there's parts of him that have this kind of overblown ego and need to control things. And so it makes sense that that all of the journalists and all of the news people hang out on Twitter. And if you want to influence the culture, that's where you need to be, and you need to have your voice heard. So that's why he bought it. There's no other it's not going to make money in the long run. Like every social media company, they all end up kind of petering out. I know these guys don't want to believe that, but if you look at them, they do, or they have to go in a different direction. Like you look at Reddit, they kind of took away their focus on news when things were getting really ugly with all the white supremacy and all the stuff that was going on. They just tamped that out of the algorithm and went in a different direction. So the money isn't to be made doing what he seems to want to do with it.
Yeah, it just seems, and again, I guess the other thing that's scary is you have these social media sites, and you have Twitter and Facebook and whatever else, and, they're back, you have with Amazon, and, it's just crazy, all this money that I just think it has an intimidating effect on people when they see stories about all this money being thrown around. And I'm not sure it's good. It just seems to me that you have a few, I was going to say guys, but, Jeff Bezos and now Musk, who have incredible amounts of power. And it just, I don't know, there's something scary about it. I don't think it's good for democracy, but we will see. We're going to go to a break now so we can, for our radio listeners, but we're going to stay with our viewers on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Our guest in this half hour is Sarah Jones, who is the editor-in-chief of Politicus. We were talking about the Musk acquisition of Twitter in this segment. In the next segment, we're going to talk about what I call GOP Freak Week. It seems to me all the GOP freaks were coming out of the woodwork this year, past week. Marjorie Taylor Greene, we're back to January 6th, the abortive coup attempt. We're going to talk about all of that when we get back with more of Deadline DC with Brad Bannon and Sarah Jones from Politicus USA.
What I know about courage, I learned from my adoptive mom. She said sometimes you just gotta hold on.
Mark,
and know we'll get...
can you play the audio now on Marjorie Taylor Greene? Welcome back to Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. This broadcast of Deadline DC is brought to you by my political polling company, Bannon Communications Research, which polls for progressive issue groups, labor unions, and Democrats. We're going to talk about GOP Freak Week in this segment with Sarah Jones, but let's start with audio from Marjorie Taylor Greene in from her testimony in her sedition trial.
Demonstrations in D.C. on the 6th.
I don't recall.
And who put it on your calendar?
I don't know.
Somebody on your staff, I take it?
I have no idea. I don't know. I do not recall that, no. I don't recall. I don't remember. I don't think so. I don't recall the exact days. I don't think so. I don't recall that at all. I don't know. I don't recall. That was the video, but I don't recall.
That was Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia. She was testifying in a trial this week, and the trial is about her disqualification from the congressional ballot in Georgia because she aided and abetted the attempted coup on January 6th. And a judge now is holding a trial to determine whether her support of the abortive coup disqualified her from running for re-election.
What's your emergency?
Our guest in this half hour is Sarah Jones, who is editor-in-chief of Politicus USA. It seems to me last week the Republicans just went crazy. And it can't be good news when the face of the Republican Party is Marjorie Taylor Greene and her ridiculous testimony or lack of testimony in her sedition trial last week. With the help of the Biden administration, our NATO allies, we're helping the people of a fledgling democracy in Ukraine resist the invasion and occupation of their capital, Kyiv. Here in the United States, we've successfully resisted an armed invasion of the capital by a violent right-wing terrorist aided and abetted by Putin's puppet, Donald Trump, and his Republican cronies like Marjorie Taylor Greene. Republican threat to Ukraine persists, as does the fight for freedom, democracy here in the United States. Republicans threaten democracy here with their fantasies about the illegitimacy of Joe Biden's presidential victory, restrictions on the right to vote, and the limitations on freedom of women to make choices about their own bodies. It's up to Democrats and all patriotic Americans to aggressively defend democracy and fight tyranny here and abroad. Our guest in this half hour again is Sarah Jones, editor-in-chief of Politicus USA. Sarah, we just heard a clip of Marjorie Taylor Greene's testimony in her ballot trial, her sedition trial. We're going to return with our radio audience right after this break. We're back with more of Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. Our guest in this half hour is Sarah Jones, editor-in-chief of Politicus. Sarah, we just heard a clip from the sedition trial, that's what I'd like to call it, of Marjorie Taylor Greene, U.S. representative from Georgia. It inspired a lot of drinking games, have a blast every time she said, I can't recall. What's your take on her testimony or lack of testimony, Sarah?
Well, I actually wrote an article comparing her to Nixon because Nixon had that, the infamous I don't recall. And I thought, it's so, this is what you see with somebody who's so afraid of knowing that their testimony will lead to perjury or to a referral to higher legal authorities if she told the truth. So she was trying to walk a fine line. I think we know now that she wasn't telling.
Does anybody say Marjorie Taylor Greene and truth in the same sentence?
I think it's important to point out, like, first of all, as you said, this is the week of freaks, but none of this is normal. What we are seeing, and we're being bombarded on all sides, including what your point about Elon Musk. We're being bombarded with this takeover of our country, and the people with money are taking over all the spaces where we can have discussions about democracy. So Republicans, they've stopped trying to win elections by appealing to voters, and now there is just a relentless pursuit to power through the delegitimization of the democratic process. That's what we are seeing. Marjorie Taylor Greene, I thought, she looked less brash and sure of herself than she usually does, but that isn't really saying much because she has that special brand of willful ignorance with the feverish kind of extremist true believer energy that comes off of her. She really isn't qualified. Even if she hadn't participated in this insurrection, I don't recall I don't know who put this on my calendar. I don't know who posted that video of me saying these things. I don't know that there is video of that. All of that, they're calling Joe Biden. They're saying he has dementia, and this is how they are. Kevin McCarthy just, denied something, and then Rachel Maddow rolls out the tape within hours of him saying exactly what he just said he never said. So these are very dishonest people who have an agenda, and I think it's very clear that they're deliberately deceiving people.
Let me ask a couple questions. I was watching some of that testimony of Marjorie Taylor Greene on C-SPAN or whatever it is. And I mean, her testimony was so ridiculous. She couldn't remember anything about anything. And then the prosecutor, the attorney, showed her tweets where she called, supported the abortive Capitol coup on January 6th. She praised the people who occupied the Capitol. And, my first question is, does it matter? You said this is not normal, but is this becoming the new normal? I mean, it's just crazy. Last week you had Marjorie Taylor Greene. You had Kevin McCarthy, the Republican leader of the U.S. House of Representatives, who said that he had not asked Trump to resign on January 6th, but then two enterprising reports produced audio of him doing exactly that. This is the face the Republican Party is showing the nation. And, sometimes I wonder if this is like the new normal and people accept this crazy. I don't know. And I guess, first of all, I was thinking, if Marjorie Taylor Greene gets disqualified from the ballot in Georgia because of support of the, sedition, and that's what January 6th was. It was treason, rebellion, and sedition, in my opinion. Aren't they just going to elect some other nutball in that congressional district in Georgia who'll be just as crazy?
Well, first of all, I don't think she's going to be taken off the ballot. I mean, that looks very unlikely to happen. The judge, a little and not seeming to grasp the larger issues from what I saw, but very difficult. Has to go to, the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, who's being primaried by a Trump-backed person. So he has a reason, to try to get in good with those people. So I'm not seeing a lot of hope that is going to happen, but absolutely, I lived in Georgia for a while. The amount of, and her district, much worse than where I lived, but, it's we're living in very divided times. That's an understatement. One side has become a cult. The other side is at risk, and nobody really seems to be doing anything about that. And I think that your point about this becoming normalized is really what I would love to highlight, because we can go through all these crazy details that just came up today. Just today, this new barrage of text showing that the House Republicans and members of Trump's inner circle were all involved in January 6th. A domestic terrorist attack is what it's been labeled. It's also sedition and treason, in my opinion. I don't know why people don't say that. But I also wonder, where is the upset? Where are the people protesting and standing up for this? And it's, here we are. You look at that Virginia election that you and I talked about so much when it was going on, and in the middle of all this, you're going to elect another Trump person, and you're going to fall for the story that this guy is a moderate. I fear for our country right now. And then to top all of that off, the large conglomerates that own many of these social media companies are trying to silence news like our publication in a variety of ways that is, I think we're looking at a time when you're only going to hear certain voices talking about this stuff. And I don't think, honestly, that we hear the way things really are. I think there's way too much attempt at balance. And by balance, then it's to try to make these two sides equal when the two sides aren't equal. And right now, what needs to be discussed of the utmost priority is what happened on January 6th. Why are these people still in office? And how are we going to save our democracy?
Well, it seems to me last week the Republicans put their worst face forward with all the attention on, Kevin McCarthy's lies, Marjorie Taylor's lies, and that's what they are. Their memories aren't that bad, I'm sorry. But at the same time, Americans are very unhappy. They are very angry about inflation. They're angry about crime and immigration. The president's job rating is, hovering at 40%. Is the Republican crazy that's going on enough to make Americans think twice about putting these people in control of the House of Representatives or the Senate, or is their anger about the direction of the country so intense they're going to basically overlook this crazy and let these people run the U.S. House of Representatives?
Well, this is a good question, and we just saw this happen in France. They have a new sort of version of Fox News, which is driven, and that's why Le Pen did as well as she did. And we see the same thing happening here. What is going to happen? Instead of talking about January 6th, they're talking about Mickey Mouse and Mr. Potato Head and how liberals, want to come and tell your kids what to do and are teaching them about being transgendered in third grade, which is not happening anywhere. So all of that's their focus, and they fearmonger so much because, of course, when you're not actually legislating for people, it's very easy to have a unified message to run on, which is whatever the culture war issue is, and then they have all of their media outlets push that nonstop, and it seeps into the mainstream, and then people vote on that. All of which goes back to my complaint about the way that that journalism is handled. I'm not talking about individual journalists. I have the utmost respect for individuals. I'm talking about what comes down from on high about being, fake balance, about making two sides seem equal.
Okay. Well, I hope you mentioned the French presidential election. French President Macron beat a Donald Trump clone. by a fairly decisive margin, pretty close to 59 to 41. And I certainly hope that means that cooler heads will prevail in the United States also, although I'm not so sure. I certainly hope we do. That's it today for Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. I want to thank our guest in this segment, Sarah Jones, the editor-in-chief of Politicus USA. I also want to thank our first guest, Mayor Victoria Woodards of Tacoma, who's also the first vice president of the National League of Cities. Leslie will be back tomorrow, so be sure to watch and listen to her. Be safe and be strong, and tune back in to Deadline DC next Monday.